What if Deku was a Saiyan? What if Deku was born into power, into the Saiyan race, an elite class of warriors, which conquers planets for a tyrant by the name of Frieza? Well, you're about to find out. Alright. So after the intro, I'm assuming many of you guys are just like, oh yeah, I can't wait to watch this series. Now, before you do, I do have a couple of things to say that I didn't get to say in the intro because I was trying something new. That being said though, guys, I do have a couple of things to say. Number one, this video is going to be featuring another What If YouTuber, which many of you guys are probably not aware of. It's one of my boys. His name is Archimedes, Aizen. The man is an absolute Chad. He is awesome. Like, the man has a bunch of what ifs on his channel. He has a pretty good mic. He's actually doing good things for himself. Right now he's just kind of practicing in his storytelling. And I was like, you know what? Let me hook my boy up, right? We're like, I'm gonna give you a feature, maybe push you out a little bit. So if you guys like his part, which will be featured in this What If, I do, I do ask you guys go check out his channel in case you want some more What If content, because the man has a couple of What Ifs. He does Bleach, he does Naruto, he does MHA What Ifs. I'm pretty sure he might even do some Dragon Ball What Ifs sometime soon. But with that being said though, guys, I hope you guys do go on to enjoy the video, which will be a movie special. And with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so our story is going to start far away on the planet of the Saiyan race. This is when, Deku's mother, I said mother and father, but mother and father were basically going to be throwing Deku into a space pod, literally chucking the man like a football, and then just sending him off by kicking him as hard as they can, similar to a football. I'm totally kidding, but seriously though, they'd basically do something very similar to Bardock and Gine. Deku's father would steal a ship in hopes that Deku can survive this catastrophic event, because at this current moment, Frieza is destroying the Saiyan planet. And at this moment, every single Saiyan is actually present in the planet of, Vegeta. That includes Vegeta, Goku, and others such as that. Deku will be the only survivor of the Saiyan race. So, with that being said, this is when Deku would basically obviously get sent off on some Superman type stuff, and Deku would end up landing on planet Earth. They would have ended up putting a different coordinate in for a different planet. However, a space meteor would have hit Deku's pod and sent him tumbling to the planet of Earth. This would lead to Deku crashing while two people who were actually on a little bit of a road trip in the middle of the woods, this being Inko and Hisashi Midoriya, would basically just be wandering as they would see a giant flying meteor coming very close to them. Hisashi would look at Inko as she would say, "Make a wish, honey." She would say, "I wish we had a son," as immediately, like 5 seconds into it, they would realize that that meteor is coming extremely close, and they would jump away as they would both barely dodge out of the way, and a flying spaceship would just come in out of nowhere, crashing through the atmosphere. As Inko and Hisashi would both just go over to check out what's in it, they would both be very fearful, but Hisashi, trying to look strong, would go over to it as immediately the pod opens and they would see a crying child. This is when Hisashi would just be like, "It's a kid." Inko would look at Hisashi, she would say, "Do you know what this means?" Hisashi would look at her, she would say, "My wish came true." Hisashi would look at Inko as she would say, "What do you mean, Inko?" She would say, "Well, I just wished for a son, and now there's a baby before us. This could be a sign." Hisashi would look at her as he would say, "You might be right, but why does this kid have a tail, and where did he come from?" Inko would basically pick up a crying Izuku while he's basically just sitting there crying. She would then basically look at him as Izuku's name would be, let's see, his name would be a random Saiyan name. All right, I can't be bothered to give him a Saiyan name, so it's just gonna be a random Saiyan name, right? Yeah, excuse me. But yeah, it's basically just gonna have a random Saiyan name, and this is when Inko would basically name Izuku. She'd be like, "Well, might as well take him in, right? This is gonna be our baby, Izuku." As Hisashi hears that, he's just like, "Yo, that name's actually kind of fire." And Inko would be like, "Really?" As Hisashi would just look at her and wrap his arm around her. Inko and Hisashi would get into their car and they would basically leave the area, as the government would arrive about 2 days later after the discovery of a spaceship crashing into their atmosphere, and they would find a crashed space pod, this being from the Saiyan race, as they would find the message that is within it: "Save our child." They would see this, and this is when they would all basically start freaking out, searching for the boy. However, there would be zero way for them to locate him, seeing as Inko and Asashi took him to the outskirts to where they live at in Japan. This is when Deku would basically grow up being adopted, and he would never ever even be told this. Deku would just think that, that tail of his is just natural, and it just has it just because it's his quirk. A bunch of other people would assume the same thing, and Deku would grow up just like a normal child. However, one change to the story, other than the fact that Deku was going to be a Saiyan, is that this version of events, Bakugo is going to be gender bended. And some of you guys are probably like, yo, I swear, Zether, if you gender bend Bakugo, I'm going to literally, I'm going to find you and I'm going to swat your entire house. And to that, I say, my bad, bro, but come on now. Saiyans like strong-willed women, and Bakugo as a female, that's as strong-willed as you can get. So it's like, yeah, I had to do it. The name of this gender-bending character will, of course, be Katsumi Bakugo. That's going to be Bakugo's name in this version of events. And with that being said, Deku would go to preschool. This is where he would meet a girl by the name of Katsumi, and she would notice that Deku has a tail with a mind of its own. During the time that Deku has been growing up, Deku would have grown up alongside many of the other kids, and Deku would have grown up a lot more stronger than all the other kids. See, in this version of events, Deku never ended up practicing martial arts because nobody was there to teach him, so Deku was kind of just a little bit of a normal child until, well, he grew up. Katsumi and Deku would become some pretty close friends, as she would be like Mrs. Popular because, she has the strongest quirk and everybody praises her all the time. Deku would kind of just always be second to her because at this point she would be so much stronger than Deku. She has an explosion quirk while Deku has, he has a pretty high power level for a kid because, he is an elite Saiyan, so Deku is pretty strong. However, he doesn't really know how to control the power, so all he has is really immense brute strength. So yeah. With that being said, Deku would basically grow up with Katsumi, and she would grow up liking Deku. And Deku would honestly not know it because he's completely oblivious to this fact. That being said, Deku would know her for a while. And yeah, that being said, Deku would honestly just have a very normal childhood up until one day when we are going to be time skipping to the day where he is 7 years old. Deku would be going home from school, as it's on this particular day that it would be a little bit of a late day. Since Deku stayed behind to hang out with Katsumi, they ended up having a little bit of tutoring after school because they both didn't understand reading, and so they ended up staying after school. That being said, on Deku's way home, Deku would have basically arrived at his house, as it's on this day that there would be a full moon. And of course, Inko, being the type of person she is, she would show Deku this. Deku would go over there with Inko as he would stare up at the full moon, and Inko would have her arm wrapped around Izuku as she would say, you've been kindling joy for us ever since you came into our lives. Thank you. However, right as she looks at Deku, Deku's eyes would have started glowing an ominous red color, as fur would start to grow and Deku would become a giant, monstrous great ape. Deku would start rampaging as he would immediately stomp on Inko, and he would begin to destroy and wreak havoc on the surrounding area. Many people would start leaving and evacuating the area, as pro heroes would have to come in and restrain Deku. This is when a bunch of heroes would come in, such as Best Jeanist, Midnight. A bunch of the top rated heroes would come in and start trying to hold Deku back. However, the more that they tried, the more Deku would go haywire, and Deku's great ape transformation would be on a different level. Deku was leveling this entire area until a pro hero by the name of All Might would arrive. He would punch Deku so hard that Deku gets flung down, and it's at this moment that another hero, who was a samurai hero, would end up rushing in at Deku as he would cut his tail straight off, not knowing of its effects. As soon as that tail gets cut off, Deku would turn into a normal 7-year-old kid as he would begin to fall slowly from the air, and All Might would catch Deku. This is when he would realize that it was just a normal boy. His quirk must have gone haywire, and everybody in the surrounding area would just begin to say that kid's a freak. That kid should be taken care of. He killed so many. Deku, during the time that he transformed into a great ape, would have actually ended up causing a lot of casualties, and that would have many people angered. That being said, there would be a trial for Deku, in a private trial, that being said, for Deku to see what his fate shall be. Shall they put him down, or will they try to train his power so that this will never happen again? However, they would notice his tail, it's not growing back for some reason. And Deku would also have that realization as well. The government would basically try to take Deku in after realizing what Deku's potential is, and they would begin to try to make him a hero. So for the next couple of years, Deku would grow up alongside a special organization by the government which essentially trains future pro heroes with potential. The same thing that Hawks was put in as a young child. Deku would be taken in there, and Deku would end up basically growing up with a bunch of heroes trying to train Deku. At this point, it would have been about 2 months after the incident, and Deku's tail would grow back. A bunch of people would be very fearful of this. However, this is when people would begin to say that if there was a way for Deku to learn to control the wrath of this giant ape form, then Deku could become such a powerful foe that zero villains would be able to stand in his way. And to that, they are honestly not wrong. This is when Deku would basically grow up, and well, Deku would end up learning a lot of techniques. At this point, I'm going to be saying that Deku would grow up alongside a little bit of a friend, however. No. I said he would grow up, but that's a way too big of a time skip. Instead, I'm going to be saying that Deku is essentially just going to spend the next couple of months just training, as Deku would get such a pump out of training. Deku loves training and fighting against pro heroes who help train him up. He would learn the same style of martial arts which Vegeta is trained in, with a little bit of Goku's martial arts style thrown in there as well. And he would be very, very proficient at fighting in hand-to-hand combat. Deku during this time would have also learned how to use his ki. He would even learn how to shoot ki blasts and fly. And Deku, his tail would grow back, as I had already stated. However, people would try to have Deku to control his power. That being said, Deku would grow up after about a couple of months, as I'm going to say we have a 7-month time skip. And at this point, Deku would be very cocky and arrogant. See, Deku has never had anybody basically put up that big of a threat to him. And seeing as he's barely almost 8 years old, and he's already able to spar with All Might without getting completely abolished, completely destroyed, Deku is very cocky and arrogant. See, he's about as strong as Goku was by the time that he met Bulma. So that's basically what Deku's power level is at the current moment. That being said, a lot of heroes would end up influencing Deku over the years, causing multiple heroes to basically end up helping to train Deku and give him life advice, which would cause other people to basically start trying to train Deku. A bunch of higher ranked pro heroes would be the ones who mainly do this, and this would basically cause for one pro hero on a certain day to bring his son, hoping that his child would be affected by Zuko's potential, and pretty much this son would be Shoto Todoroki. He would bring his son in and watch as Deku trains, and he just has a smile on his face. He just has such a rush every time he's destroying robots and fighting against pros. And Shoto would just see that look in Deku's eyes, as he would get a little bit fearful. But when Endeavor would tell them both to basically meet up, Deku would look at him as he would say, "What are you doing here?" This is when Shoto, I try to do the Vegeta voice, but it's not Vegeta, it's Deku. He would say, "What are you doing here?" As Shoto would just be like, my dad. As Deku would look up at Endeavor and he would say, "Oh, Endeavor, are you going to train with me today?" As Endeavor would look at him and say, "No, I brought a little partner for you to train with. I brought my son. I was hoping you could maybe influence him and help him realize that training isn't so bad." Deku would get into a fighting position as he would say, "Can do, Endeavor," as this is when Deku would basically look at Shoto and say, "Well, aren't you gonna get into your sparring position?" Todoroki would just look at Deku as he's just like, no. And Deku would then look at Todoroki as he's just like, "Why'd you bring this kid? He's such a sorry excuse. If I was your son, I would be using those gifts of mine to become the most powerful hero." And Endeavor would just chuckle as he would say, "If only you were." As it's at this point that Deku would rush at Shoto, as he would punch him straight in the gut and kick him on the head, causing Shoto to get extremely angry, and he would shoot a burst of ice at Deku, which is actually not bad. Deku would get caught up by the blast of ice, and Deku would smile. As he would break out of it, Deku would then rush at Todoroki, as Todoroki would shoot a little bit of a big ice geyser at Deku. Deku would dodge out of the way as he would jump on top of Todoroki, and he would smile at him. As Todoroki is being held down by Deku, Deku would smile down at Todoroki as he would say, "You know what? You're not half bad." As he would then look towards Todoroki and extend his hand out, which would cause Shoto to basically just be like, "Why do you like training so much?" Deku would look at Todoroki and just be like, "Well, I mean, why not? It's the best way to get strong. It gives me a pump and it gets my mind off of things. Training is the best thing ever." Todoroki would say, "Training is the worst. I never get to hang out with any kids of my age. I never get to do anything. My dad just wants me to be strong like him. And what if I don't want to be strong? What if I want to have a childhood instead? Deku would look at Todoroki as he would say, well, I mean, yeah, I understand your dad wants you to be strong, but don't look at it as an evil thing. I mean, maybe it's for your own good. Todoroki would look at Deku and he would say, no, it's not for my own good. My mother was sent away from me because of him. As Deku would look at him and he would say, well, how about I tell you my story? He's like, everybody has a sad one, but that doesn't mean that you can let it basically change everything and alter the way you perceive the world. Todoroki would look at Deku and say, huh? As Deku would say, when I was 7 years old, I killed my mother and father. It wasn't my fault though. I turned into a great ape and I let my quirk go haywire as I ended up killing them both. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to experience and deal with. Those two people raised me from birth and they've been helping me to become the person I am. And I swore that on their names I would become the most powerful hero so that no other kid will ever have to have something like this happen to them. No other kid will ever have to have that fate happen to them which happened to me. Todoroki would be basically enlightened, and this is when Todoroki would just look at Deku as he would say, looks like I'm not the only one who had it pretty bad to start my life off. Deku would say, yeah, you're not. And he would then tap Shoto on the back saying, come on now, that's enough waterworks for today. We got some training to get to. Todoroki would look at Deku and smile as he would say, right, from now on, I'm gonna start training just like you. As he would say, and someday, I'll be able to beat you. As he would hold his fist out to Deku, Deku would bump his fist as he would then say, well, I can't wait to get started. As it's at this point that we are now going to be having an 8-year time skip to which Deku and Shoto would basically be chilling and training and living life during this time. With, Katsumi on her end of things, basically training even more because she thought that Deku died on that day and that Deku was one of the casualties. However, he was the one who caused the casualties, and not a lot of people would even know about that incident because, well, it was covered up by the government because people don't exactly want people to know about Deku's little situation. That being said, Todoroki would get exponentially stronger, dude. He's training alongside a Saiyan, so Todoroki is going to be very, very powerful. How strong do you guys think Todoroki would be by the end of his training, by the time that he's basically a pro hero and he has a way better control over his flames and ice? That's basically what Todoroki's like, except you have to add martial arts skill in there, as well as a stronger determination and the fact that he has to fight against somebody who at this point is already stronger than All Might. Todoroki, he would already be stronger than All Might as well because he stands a better chance against Deku than All Might ever will. See, during the little time skip that we had, Deku and Todoroki would both actually end up getting trained by a bunch of other people, and Endeavor would begin to bring Todoroki in every day, as Todoroki's whole basic view about training would lead to him essentially starting to enjoy the time that he was basically spending training with his father, because that time he viewed as him getting stronger and one step closer to being stronger than Deku. And that would lead to Endeavor basically not becoming that person that we saw in canon. He would not become like that, and instead we would have an Endeavor who is more along the lines of the one in the manga, who's more chilled out and mellowed. He would have also brought back Todoroki's mom after he started training, and well, she would basically be allowed to see Shoto whenever she wants, which would lead to Shoto growing up a lot better. And Deku, oh, Deku. This man is already leagues above All Might. This man is broken to the bone. Like, this man, Deku, is about as strong as Goku was by the time that he finished training with Kami in Dragon Ball. Yeah, that's as strong as I want Deku to be at the age of, well, let's say he's going to be 15, right? Because that was 7 plus 8. I believe that's 15. Yeah, that's 15. Yeah, 15, right? And yeah, Deku is he's pretty strong to say the least, since, you know, he can beat All Might. That being said, I'm pretty sure many of you guys already understand what I'm basically trying to put down. They're both very powerful. That being said, there's really not much to cover. Deku and Todoroki would become some pretty good friends, seeing as the fact that they have 8 years to basically bond. So they're pretty much like brothers in this version of events. That being said, this is when we will now basically be having the first day of their, no, not the first day, but the day of the entrance exam coming up. However, Deku is not exactly going to be having the actual test, which most people have. See, Deku and Todoroki are both actually going to be taking the what's it called, the recommendation exam, I believe. Yeah, the recommendation exam. Yeah, they're both basically going to be taking that. That being said, this is when a bunch of people would essentially see that Deku and Todoroki are just way too broken. However, a bunch of heroes already know of what Deku and Todoroki's potential are, because a lot of the heroes at UA have already done their part in helping Deku and Todoroki. Oh, and there's also one more power that Deku ended up mastering while during those 8 years, and I'm pretty sure many of you guys already know what that is: the Ozaru Wrath form. However, he doesn't have to turn into a great ape anymore. Deku can get the multiplier of the form in his base, just like Broly can. Yep, he learned how to do that. If Broly can do it living on a literal planet with like just one old guy to help him train, then Deku can definitely do it with the entire world trying to get this man to become that powerful. So yeah, I think it's pretty, it's pretty understandable that I gave him that. That being said, this is when Deku would take the entrance exam and he would shatter every single record. Deku and Todoroki would go just crazy, and they got in pretty easily, to say the least. They would have actually ended up fighting against a couple of robots just to see where they stand, and Deku would have obliterated his within an instant. Literally no key blast or anything. Deku would have just blitzed it so fast that nobody could see, and by the time they realized that Deku had taken out every single robot that was before his path, Aizawa would have tried to erase his quirk. However, he would see that there was no real way to erase the quirk. That being said, this is when we will now basically be covering Deku and Todoroki just kind of chilling for the next couple of days until they get their their inevitable acceptance letters, which would be about 2 days from then, and the very next day would be Monday. So they're basically getting their stuff together, and this is when Deku would basically be told that he is essentially going to be staying at UA dorm, because, well, he's not exactly going to get flown over by the government every time that he has to essentially like, right, let's see, give him a hat, and he's not essentially going to have to go back and forth every 5 seconds, right? Oh my god, bro, why people out here making so much noise? I'm trying to make a video. Give me a second, boys. Okay, I'm back. So the noise basically stopped. That being said, this is when, they're basically going to go to UA for their first day, and Deku and Todoroki would meet up at the front door of UA. They would both basically end up walking in together, and this is when Deku and Todoroki would basically walk inside. Immediately when they walk inside, Deku would be wrapping his fully black hair, because all Saiyans have, black hair. The only reason that the Deku in the thumbnail has the green hair is for you guys to be able to realize that that's Deku. I recolored that image for Deku to pop out a little bit more than he already does. That being said, talking about recoloring and stuff like that, I mean, your boy been going crazy right now, it's playing some Sky Wars right now with the boy, because, I don't know if you guys can see in the gameplay, but right now I'm playing some good old-fashioned Sky Wars, just like I have in all my other games. So, if y'all are down to watch me, catch a dub or two, then, might as well. But in case you're just listening to this like an audiobook, then I'm probably just wasting my time, but yeah. Anyways, this is when they would both basically arrive, and upon arrival, this is when a certain somebody would notice Deku immediately and realize who this is. Deku would basically walk inside the door, as a certain somebody would have been sitting down with her head down. However, this is when she would look towards the door, as she would see a boy with fully black hair and just black eyes, looking a lot like the boy she remembered from her childhood. Immediately she would stand up and say, "Deku?" As Izuku would look towards her direction and say, "What did you just?" As he would see Katsumi, and this is when he would just say, "It's you." Katsumi would rush at Deku and hug him so tightly, as she would say, "What happened to you?" This is when, right before Deku and Katsumi even get the chance to talk, Aizawa would say, "Everyone be quiet. We're going to be going outside to take a quirk exam." Uraraka would be like, "What about the orientation?" And Aizawa would just be like, "We don't have time for that. Get suited up. Let's go." Everybody would get suited up, of course, and this is when they would meet Aizawa outside. This would lead to Aizawa throwing the ball at Katsumi, who would actually end up throwing the ball about 900 meters, 200 more than in canon because she trained a lot harder, and yeah, she did pretty well in terms of that. So she would end up getting 900 meters, and Aizawa would be very, very impressed by that. That being said, she would walk by Deku and say, "Beat that." Deku would just smirk as he would say, "Oh, trust me, I will," as he would be up next, and he would throw that ball right into orbit. Deku would throw that ball so hard that Katsumi's just like, "What happened?" And Deku would just give her a little bit of a quirky smirk, as this is when Deku would basically proceed to take the little quirk exam and stuff like that, and Deku would pretty much go through the entirety of the quirk exam, just obliterating everything. The grip strength machine he would destroy that. They would have a punching machine test, which Deku would destroy, just like Vegeta did in Dragon Ball Z in the tournament where they basically had the Majin Buu arc. Yeah, that's what Deku does. And well, for the rest of the stuff, Deku just obliterates everything. The long jump, the side to side, the push-ups, the sit-ups. Deku gets perfect scores, essentially. Deku gets the most perfect scores of all time. Todoroki comes in second, Momo comes in fourth, and Katsumi comes in third. Because, she trained a lot harder, so, she's definitely going to get better scores than in canon. That being said, this would lead to, well, Deku passing all the tests and, getting first place, and Aizawa would just be jaw dropped. Like, this man would just be so shocked at how strong Deku and this boy Todoroki are. He would say that he expected that from the son of the number 2 hero. However, who is this other kid? Like, Aizawa was never had a part in training Deku, so he doesn't even know about him. And therefore, after that, Deku would basically look at Todoroki as he would say, "Yeah, we crushed that thing." Todoroki would say, "You're still stronger than me, but I'll catch up." As Deku would say, "Nah, I'm sure you will, man. Just keep training." Deku would then basically just be like, "So should we go?" As this is when a certain somebody would run behind Deku and punch him across the head, as she would say, "You're not going anywhere. For the rest of the day, me and you are going to hang out and catch up on all the years we missed." Deku would look at Katsumi and give her a little bit of a smile, as this is when Katsumi would just be like, "All right, let's go." She would grab Deku by the hand, and they would end up going to a little bit of a ramen shop, as it's at this point that Deku would pretty much tell her about everything that happened, and Katsumi would just be shocked on a whole nother level, and she'd be pretty angry at the fact that the government just took Deku in and started controlling him after the day that monkey incident happened. She heard about it, but she thought it was just a myth because it got covered up pretty well. Deku would look at her and say, "Nah, it was pretty real, and it didn't really feel like the greatest thing in the world." As Katsumi would say, "I bet." This is when they would continue to talk and chill for the rest of the day, and this is when we will now be skipping over to the day of the heroes versus villains. Very next day, Deku will of course head to school, and Deku and Todoroki will basically end up going through their normal school day with Katsumi hanging out with them, and they would be a little bit of a trio. A certain someone would be staring at Todoroki from afar, and Deku would notice that, just being like, Hey Toto, look at her. She's looking at you, man." Todoroki would be like, "Be quiet." He'd say, "I'm not interested. What I am interested in right now, though, is getting stronger." As Deku would say, Understandable. Not everybody can be me." Todoroki would be like, "Nah." And this is when Deku would just say, "What? I'm not wrong, am I?" Todoroki would just be like, "Nah." Alright, fine. As it's at this point that Todoroki would go over there to Momo and basically ask her out on a date. As Deku would just be like, "Okay, who's a go-getter?" As Todoroki would just be like, "Me." As it's at this point that Todoroki and Deku would look at each other and just start dying of laughter. At this point, they would basically end up going to the last class of the day, which is hero training. As they would be greeted by All Might, who would say, "I am here." However, Deku and Todoroki would not be shocked one bit, as All Might would go up to them and be like, "Guys, you guys have to act shocked." As they'd be like, "Oh my god, All Might!" They'd be like, oh my god!" And it's just so clear that they're both faking it. Everybody in the class would just be like, "What's up with these two?" And this is when Deku would fly over to All Might, as he would say, "Me and All Might, we go way back. This man practically raised me." As everybody's just like, "What?" They would be like, "You're flying, dude." Deku would be like, "Yeah, didn't I show that yesterday?" They'd be like, "No, you just jumped over the thing." And Deku was like, "Oh, well, I could have flown too." As this is when he would just say, "All right, everybody, just get suited up. The clothes make the pros." As everybody would, of course, get suited up. And Deku's hero costume is basically going to be the Goku black outfit, because that is so fire, bro. The Goku black outfit is heat. Deku has black hair, though, so it kind of looks a little weird, but you know, we can work around that, right? We can work around that, right? Yeah, we will. Anyways, Deku would basically be placed with Todoroki by accident. It was a total gamble. So All Might, as soon as he saw that Deku and Todoroki were on the same team, he was like, God have mercy on whoever has to fight against these guys. And their opponents would be Mineta and Koda. This is gonna be so beautiful. Like Mineta and Koda versus Deku and Todoroki. It's gonna be beautiful. That being said, Deku and Todoroki would completely rock their shit, passing with flying colors. And what were they gonna do about it, bro? Like, really be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what were Deku and Todoroki going to do whatsoever about, you know, I mean, no, Koda and, what's it called? Koda and, what was the other name that I was going to say? Mineta, yeah. Koda Mineta going to do? Yeah, absolutely nothing. That being said, Todoroki would have a little bit of a date with Momo after school, as well as Deku with Katsumi. Deku would get a little flirty with her because, you know, she developed quite well, if you get what I'm putting down. And Deku and Katsumi would end up going, you know, to Katsumi's place. As she would show her parents that Deku was still alive, they would both immediately, like, just be like, Deku! As they would both be shocked to have him, and they would have a pretty dope dinner for that time. That being said, about a week would pass, and this is when we will now be jumping over to the day of the USJ attack. However, in this version of events, everything is going to go different, dude. We have a Saiyan Deku, and I'm not like every other what if YouTuber who has it so that Deku ends up still losing even though he's a literal Saiyan. But no, something else is going to happen instead, which I don't know if I'm going to do quite yet, or if I won't, seeing as this is kind of scripted / unscripted. Like, I have little key details written down, but after this point, I just was too lazy and I couldn't even bother. So, with that being said, this is when they would all be on the bus talking about who the strongest is. People would say that it's in between Deku and Todoroki, but some of them would say that Deku's ability to fly and, you know, be very strong is pretty cool. He's like a comic superhero. And people would say that Todoroki is fire and ice. That's like the strongest thing ever. So people would be pretty split down the middle on who the strongest is, until Todoroki would just say, yeah, no, he's stronger than me by like a mile. Everybody would be like, what? And Todoroki would be like, yeah, this man, he's even stronger than All Might. And everybody would just immediately just be like, there's no way he's stronger than All Might. I call the cap. Todoroki would be like, nah, I mean, you can ask All Might himself, as All Might would be on the bus as well. He'd be like, he's way stronger than me. And everybody would just be like, what? And Mineta would just be like, then why'd you make me fight him? That's not fair. As everybody would just start laughing. And it's at this point that they would basically just continue having a normal little bus ride, right? They would just be chilling. And hold on, let me move my mic since I'm going to be chilling a little bit more. I'm gonna be laying down, just relaxing. And what's it called? This is when they would, of course, arrive to the inevitable USJ. Deku, upon arriving, would immediately sense a bunch of different key signatures, and on command, Deku would look at Shoto, as Todoroki would basically look at Deku and say, what? As Deku would just say, there's trouble in there. 13 would basically be walking outside, as Deku would blow a hole straight through the USJ doors and immediately rush in there. Todoroki would run after Deku using his ice, and they would both rush in there as they would start clapping the villains on sight. Aizawa, after seeing that, would be like, 13, let's go, as they would basically yell at Deku and Todoroki to stop it. All Might would jump down there as he would rush straight at the Nomu, and he would have the same battle with the Nomu in canon. He would beat up the Nomu, and this would cause Shigaraki to be like, it's not fair, it's not fair. However, before he even gets to finish his sentence, Deku would pull up and literally punch him so hard across the jaw, Todoroki's entire jaw would get broken, as immediately Deku would shoot a ki blast straight at one of Shigaraki's hands, and he would blow that entire thing off. As Deku would pull up to his other arm, he would snap it like a twig. Deku would then grab Shigaraki by the legs and slam him back and forth like a ragdoll. Kurogiri would come in and teleport Shigaraki away. However, before Kurogiri got to get away, Deku came in and hit the man Kurogiri so hard that man Kurogiri straight up almost collapsed. And right at that moment, Shigaraki and Kurogiri were barely able to escape with their lives. After that, Shigaraki arrived right in front of All-For-One as he would be just terrified. And All-For-One would see what happened to Shigaraki. He would say, what happened to you? As Shigaraki would say, there was this kid, his power, he's far beyond All Might. He would say, All Might isn't our biggest threat now. It's that boy. As he would pass out, and Shigaraki would then wake up hours later. As this is when Dr. Ujiko would begin to perform an experiment on Shigaraki. Because he lost a lot of limbs and some of them were beyond repair, he would have to replace them with robotic parts. And this would lead to Shigaraki getting that android procedure. Yep. I'm just going to say that Dr. Ujiko has been working on that, and he ends up giving him that little android procedure. So, with that being said, afterwards, all the people that were down there would basically end up just being like, yo, you guys might as well be pro heroes from the way you guys handle that. All Might would fist bump Deku and would just be like, another great one. Another great day. Seeing as nobody actually saw what Deku did to Shigaraki. He moved so fast. What happened to Shigaraki and Kurogiri was like a blur to everybody, right? And that being said, they wouldn't even have a 1 week off because there was no USJ situation. They would just cover it up as, they went a little too hard on that day. And, one of the kids, went a little crazy with his quirk, blowing a hole through, the stuff. This is when we were basically going to have them just basically going to the day of the USJ. And the reason that I do this is because Class 1B and the rest of the classes wouldn't even go up to UA. I wouldn't even go up to 1A because of the fact that they were never attacked by the other people to begin with. That being said, we will now be going over to the UA Sports Festival where Deku and Todoroki will not be participating. If Deku and Todoroki participate, here's what's going to happen. Deku blitzes the race along with Todoroki. He gets first, he gets second. The little, the little cavalry battle, Deku and Todoroki would create a dome of ice around them. Nobody can touch them. And for the battles, Deku stomps Shinso. Deku stomps on, well, I don't know what he would do against Katsumi, but he would beat her because, Goku beat Chi-Chi, so he would basically pull that. And, Todoroki basically gets beat by Deku, and Deku wins, Todoroki gets second place. That's pretty much what would happen if he were in it, which would be pretty fast to cover, to be honest. So instead, I'm going to say that the US Sports Festival is basically won by Katsumi Bakugo, the girl which is inevitably going to become Deku's wife in the future. She would catch a fat dub, and Deku and Todoroki would actually be up there commentating with Present Mike because of the fact that, well, they are too strong and they might as well be up there. However, by the end, they would have a little bit of a show-off exhibit where All Might would basically end up fighting against Todoroki and Deku. No, actually only Todoroki. Todoroki and All Might would fight, and it would be announced that Deku was even more powerful than Todoroki. And this would lead to Todoroki quite literally flash freezing All Might before he even gets a chance to react. So All Might gets GG'd, and that's where my part for What If Deku Was a Saiyan is going to be ending. I will now be passing the torch onto Archimedes Aizen. If you guys like his part for the What If video, then I do highly suggest you guys go over to his channel, check out his link, which will be first link down in the description, as well as give my boy a sub. Maybe go tell him that I sent you boys over there because the man is a living legend. He makes some pretty fire what ifs. So if you're going to enjoy the rest of this of this what if, then I hope you guys go subscribe to the man's channel, as well as leave a like, subscribe. Make sure you guys turn on those post notifications because you never want to miss the 20K special. And with that being said, I love y'all. Peace.
Yo, what is up, Zethers Nation, I guess you can say. I'm pretty much back with this new parts, or the second part, I guess you can say, even though I can't really say I'm back since I never was here before. But basically, I am Archimedes Aizen. I'm pretty much a small content creator that, basically was taught by different other what if YouTubers, and now I'm trying to, start out now, or trying to blow up. So pretty much, without further ado, guys, we are resuming What If Deku Was a Saiyan. And without further ado, guys, let's get straight into this What If. Now, pretty much where we left off after the sports festival, Deku is pretty much, feeling the vibes. He just won this, or he did not win the sports festival. He watched somebody win the sports festival, but he still felt the same excitement. He's pretty much the strongest person in the My Heroverse, or one of the strongest people in the My Heroverse, and he's pretty happy. He has his friend and his other friends, and pretty much he's just chilling. So the night after the sports festival, he and Todoroki would pretty much just be chilling. It would kind of be at a restaurant, and they would go around and spend the rest of the night doing what normal people do, I guess, to have fun. They would go sightseeing, pretty much eat at a ramen shop, whatever you guys can imagine what you would do in your free time. Anything that's fun, I guess. So after this night of just hanging out and celebrating, they would head back, and pretty much, Todoroki would let Deku, sleep over at his house, and pretty much the next morning they would pretty much eat breakfast, and they would go about their lives. So pretty much, Deku would be walking around until his phone would start to vibrate since somebody is calling him. So he would open the phone, and pretty much it would be one of the agents from the government. So pretty much he would pick up the phone, and the agent would tell Deku and Todoroki to meet them or meet him or her at the warehouse or the safe house. So pretty much Deku would say yeah, and he would hang up. So after this would happen, he'd pretty much him and Todoroki would head towards said warehouse or safe house. And once he would get in, he would see a few agents guarding the area, and he would walk up to the main person who's basically sitting in a chair. Now, Deku and Todoroki would basically sit down, and they would start discussing. Now, the agent would start to explain to them that they are now one of the strongest heroes, or one of the strongest students in all of history, and that, they're pretty much the backup plan if All Might were to retire early, or any of the high tier heroes were to become eliminated, or for some reason not be available. So he would then dig into his pocket, and he would pick up, pretty much give them two little cards, kind of like the size of a credit card. Now, this would be their provisional hero license. Now, pretty much, the agent would go on to explain that, explaining that for now, you don't want to deal with any, problems with illegal quirk usage. So, with this, you should be able to use your quirks against villains, and when you graduate high school, hopefully you'll be able to get your hero's license and be able to become number one, or pretty much a pro hero. So after this, they would pretty much leave, and the whole arc with the teachers, basically, or not the teachers themselves, but the internship arc would happen. Now, pretty much, Deku and Todoroki would actually go with Endeavor this time, and so with Katsumi, or yeah. So pretty much these three would start pretty much training. It would be pretty good training. So this whole maybe 2 weeks, Endeavor would train them what he used to train them back when Deku and Todoroki were kind of on the younger side. And pretty much Katsumi, kind of being a little new to this, had to adapt to this new form of training. But it wasn't really that hard at the end of the day. So pretty much after this would happen, they would get news about the Stain being in Hosu City. So once they realized that Stain is in Hosu City and stuff like that, they would pretty much, Endeavor would pretty much tell them about what they're doing. They're patrolling there to find villains, or Stain. So pretty much they'd be hunting down Stain. So they'd pretty much just be taking the rooftops, running through rooftops and alleys, trying to get there as fast as possible. So they would maybe take them about an hour since they're on foot. So once they get there, the sun would start to dimmer away, and the moon would start to come out. So pretty much Deku would be more enhanced by the moon, but in this timeline, it's not like when he was a kid he couldn't control it, but now he could control it. He gets more strength now. So pretty much what would happen is they'd be walking around until the Shigaraki and the Nomu would start to attack, and they would pretty much cause a whole hole in the train. Now what would happen is pretty much Gran Torino would get involved, and pretty much that would go to Saint. So Deku would be running through the small alleys and through the Hosu city, just cutting off Nomu's heads left to right. It's just easily slicing off their heads like it's nothing. So pretty much after this would happen, he would come, running around, killing Nomus, taking down villains, like knocking them out, or just trying to punch them. He doesn't really control that. So he'd pretty much see Shigaraki. Now, after the USA, Shigaraki would kind of just be in a robotic state. It's not he's not a robot, but most of his body parts are robotic. So Shigaraki would become enraged. This is the same person who pretty much destroyed him, and now he has to have these robotic parts. So he'd run towards Deku, going to use his quirk on him to basically disintegrate him. But Deku would just lean back, and the arm would kind of just pass him, and Deku would pretty much grab it with his right hand, and then get his left hand to go under it, basically snapping the arm in half. After this, he pretty much get his knee and pretty much knee him into the stomach or in the gut. After he would pretty much do this, Shigaraki would start to spit out a bunch of blood. Since he just received a kick from a Saiyan, that's definitely gotta hurt. He's not waking up for a while. So pretty much Deku would then uppercut him. He would then pretty much punch him into the air, kind of doing about a meteor combo attack. So what he do is he punch him up. He would then start punching him a little bit more before kick him down back to the ground. So pretty much what would happen is Shigaraki would be pretty he'd get his shit rocked. So after this would happen, Kirigiri would interfere and pretty much teleport him away, just like in the USA, pretty much. So Shigaraki would barely live, and Kirigiri would have some injuries, but he's mostly purple substance, so he wouldn't really be physically injured. So after this would happen, Deku would be running through an alley where he'd get a text from Todoroki. Now, let's say this is kind of like the bro code text, basically saying that he needs help and he's fighting Stain. So pretty much what would happen is instead of Deku and Kennen meeting up with Stain and saving Ina, it would be Todoroki. So pretty much Deku would pull up and he'd see Todoroki having a fight, and he didn't really want to interfere. He sees Todoroki's having a bit of fun. So pretty much what would see is Stain would go to basically a slice at Todoroki. Now in this timeline, Todoroki learning the martial arts that Deku uses and from DBZ characters use, he would be way more efficient in fighting. He wouldn't rely on his quirk. So he'd kind of raise his arm, he'd kind of put fire and ice together, perfectly balanced, and he would pretty much punch Stain in the stomach. Now after this happened, he would pretty much get sent into the wall pretty much and get knocked out. So Deku would kind of run in, pretty much high five Todoroki, and pretty much what would happen is the Nomu would come just like in canon and would pretty much grab Todoroki, kind of like how Deku did in canon. So Stain's actually not gonna save Todoroki, but basically when Deku would see this, he'd kind of yawn and do a little stretching before he'd appear behind the Nomu, and the Nomu's head would just fly straight off. Pretty much what he did is he punched to his head. So kind of using Yamamoto's punching techniques where he could punch somebody to dust, he'd kind of do something like that. So once this would happen, the Nomu would just turn straight into dust. His head, everything would just turn into atoms. After this happened, Deku would just stretch his arms like nothing happened, and pretty much this was some Black Air Force energy. His whole body, his spiritual essence, pretty much turned into Black Air Force energy. So back on topic. After Deku would pretty much completely destroy the Nomu and the Hosu City arc is finished, they would be in the office where the captain would be quite mad. Deku just killed many Nomus like it's nothing, and pretty much Deku would pull out the government card. He would pretty much hand him this card that only the head of, just barely the head of the police would know, and he would get pretty shivering. This is the government. This is like many agents here have done espionage and assassination missions. He'd realize that Deku had permission to basically do these acts. So he'd let this slide, and pretty much this will actually be the end of Hosu City arc, and it would be the end of the new arc, which would kind of be the overhaul arc, I guess you can say. So pretty much after this would happen, Aizawa would greet them back into class, just like normal, and pretty much he'd start to congratulate him. Everyone got in their experience, and pretty much he would tell them that these 3 people are gonna meet them. So pretty much the door would open and 3 people would come in. Now these people would be Mirio, Tamaki, and Nejire. So once these three people came in, they would introduce themselves, say they're Mirio Togura, Tamaki, I don't even know his last name, and Nejire Hado. So pretty much after this would happen, Mirio would go on saying that he wants to spar with them, and pretty much that's exactly what happened. So what would happen is all the people who basically got her stomped in the first part that had like their short range quirks and went to fight them like Kirishima, Mineta, and other people like that, they would have gotten Gutter stomped. So what happened would be Todoroki and Deku. So Todoroki would kind of be fighting hand to hand with Mirio, but it would be kind of annoying since he couldn't freeze Mirio to hold him in place since the permeation is quite OP. So he'd yet again punch him through the face, but Mirio would just keep taunting him. So out of nowhere, Mirio would just do his power punch and appear behind them, doing his little comical screenshot, I guess you can say. So after he would do this, Deku would, start to grunt and growl before all, kind of like he would infuse all of his killer intents into his body and just kind of go all out. So not all out like killer, but like kind of just in a fight, a spar, like all out in a spar. Not to kill though. So he just appeared right behind Mirio, and a bunch of bruises would start to form on Mirio's body. Mirio didn't have enough time to use his permeation. He has to react to the person, and since Deku is pretty much massively faster than light, he had no time to react to something like that. So pretty much Mirio would start to, he would pretty much just pass out. What Deku pretty much did is he moved so fast, it was pretty much like he basically moved in slow-mo time, kind of like Star Platinum or any of the Stan's abilities, but not like that though. So pretty much just his physical speed itself, he was able to basically punch him maybe 1,000 times over his body, and then he would appear right behind him, basically acting as if he only moved behind Mirio. So after Mirio is basically knocked out, they would basically see his injuries and basically know that Deku really rocked his shit. So after this would happen, the whole spar would end, and once Mirio would wake up and recover, he'd tell Deku and Todoroki that he would like them to join, the agency of Sir Night-Eye. So they would join the agency, and basically Deku would just, he wouldn't tell a joke. And he wouldn't really act like, Midoriya and Canon, where he pulled the All Might face. And Todoroki would just be like Todoroki. So they couldn't really tell a joke, so they would have the usual test. So I'm sorry, my bad there. Night-Eye and Deku and Todoroki would be standing in the office, and Night-Eye would explain to them that, they would have to take the stamp away from him. So Deku and Todoroki would just, go flying off the walls, going at their max power and speed, trying to, take the stamp away. So pretty much in the middle of this, Deku would be pretty much bouncing off the walls, and he noticed something. He noticed that his speed, for some reason, can get faster, but he knew he wasn't holding back. So pretty much, he would just start to unleash all of his full potential. And when this would happen, he'd pretty much, like for a second, Night-Eye was like, I can't see Deku in the future. Now, if you guys are wondering what's happening, it's Deku's moving so fast, he's actually moving faster than the future timelines can actually predict from Night-Eye's quirk. So what's happening is Deku's moving way massively faster than light, maybe immeasurable speed. And he's basically blitzing Night-Eye, taking the stamp, and pretty much stamping it, and Deku and Todoroki would pass. Now time would slow down again, or go back to the usual flow, and pretty much Night-Eye would congratulate them on their success, and the first mission would start. Now, once this mission would start, they would head towards their patrol unit with Mirio, and pretty much it would meet Eri, and that meeting would go straight to Canon. Deku, knowing that they can save Eri again, he would basically lay off. So basically, they would have the whole operation. They would plan the same tactics for invading Kai Chisaki's base. So they would invade Kai Kai Chisaki. Oh my god, that butchering. Basically, they'd invade Overhaul space, and pretty much they would go through the enemies just like in canon. But when Overhaul built the whole barrier against him, Deku didn't even flinch at this. He pretty much just slapped it away, and all of the whole barrier just blew apart. Basically, Deku would see Overhaul, and he'd just blitz him. He'd grab Overhaul by the head before Overhaul can even react and use Overhaul, and he'd pretty much just rip off his head. Now, pretty much Deku would just laugh about it and say some arrogant comment about how he's the strongest. After this, Todoroki would save Eri, and pretty much the whole overhaul arc would be finished. Now, pretty much after this would happen, the exams for the hero license, the kind of like the temporary hero license, the provisional hero license exams would happen. But the thing is, Deku and Todoroki would be excluded from it since they already attained their license. So after this exams, everyone who'd pass would pass, everyone who didn't pass would pass. They would go through their extra classes in summer camp. And speaking of the summer camp, that arc would go accordingly. Everyone would get on the bus, and they'd be heading in the road trip. So after around 3 to 4 hours of driving that bus, over the time, Deku and Todoroki would kind of be talking and chilling on the bus. And once they'd get off, Aizawa would tell Deku and Todoroki to stay on the bus. So what happened is, the Wild Wild Pussycats would pretty much send all the students down the hill, and everyone would be confused. Where is Deku and Todoroki? Those are the strongest students. How are they not here? And pretty much what they summarized it to be is maybe they'll meet them at where they're training, where they're basically training, where they're sleeping, basically in the forest. So they would go through the whole tree monsters or monsters just like in canon. So pretty much Deku and Todoroki would go with the teachers to that area, so they pretty much got a bigger head start. So once Deku and Todoroki would get there, they pretty much start help cooking food, where pretty much Todoroki and Koda would start to get get to know each other. Not like that, since basically Todoroki and Koda would start to talk to each other, and pretty much I don't think Deku would do that, since Deku's more of the cocky, arrogant one, while Todoroki's a more calm person. So after this would happen, Todoroki would start to get, resonate with Koda's personality, or not his personality, but start to understand him and his past. So after this happened, the students would come down, and they'd start, they're pretty hungry, so they would pretty much just start feasting. And after the whole dinner portion to happen, pretty much Deku, Todoroki would pretty much be on that mountainside with Koda, and the attack from the villains would happen. Pretty much Muscular would come down and start his confrontation with Deku. But Deku would see his muscle augmentation quirk, and he'd be kind of surprised. He would kind of just blitz him and start to poke at the skin, and he'd realize this is quite strong. So Deku would kind of just pull all of his power, thinking that he can stop holding back. He'd pretty much punch him, and pretty much the whole mountain would start to shake behind him. That mountain behind him would start to shake, and it would pretty much turn to dust. And pretty much when Deku looked up, there'd pretty much just be a huge hole through Muscular's chest before Muscular would just roll over and kind of get knocked out. After this, Deku would then look towards Koda and pretty much hold up Muscular's almost dead body, where he'd tell Koda to go for the finishing blow, since Koda's parents was killed by Muscular. So Koda, basically getting all the strength he can, made the gun motion, kind of like how Suigetsu does his water jutsu. He'd pretty much do something like that, and he'd blow off, or he'd shoot it, putting as much energy as he can, or power into it, and he'd pretty much blow off Muscular's head. It's not like he wanted to do it that strongly, but I guess that emotional empowerment came in clutch. So after Muscular is now eliminated, they'd go through, and pretty much what would happen is Bakugo, or that's what her name is, would get kidnapped. and pretty much the whole arc, the rescue arc, would happen, and pretty much they would go rescue her. So they would pretty much disguise as civilians, and they'd be watching from afar. So basically, once All for One and I know I basically just skipped the whole portion, but basically all the pro heroes would invade that little in the villain's base, that bar, and they would meet up in the Kimino forest or the woods, and basically All For One would be talking to other villains while they had Bakugo and capture. So like Deku Todoroki would be watching from afar since nobody else came with him. It was only Deku Todoroki. This was kind of like a family mission that only they could be involved. So after this would happen, they'd be watching, and pretty much they would, once the fighting started, Todoroki would gather up all the strength he can, getting a flashback from all the training they had with All Might and all the other pro heroes before he'd use a certain technique. Now, this technique won't be like some final Getsuga Tensho, but he'd take all of his flames and his half hot, half cold into his body, just absorb it, and then this would pretty much cause a weird reaction with his body. So his body would quickly start deteriorating since his internal body can't handle that. The only reason he's able to handle this quirk is because it's only mostly external. It doesn't go inside his body. So once all this energy would happen, he'd pretty much have like a transformation. He'd kind of look way more different. His body would change color, not too much. He'd still like you. He wouldn't be pale, all right, but he wouldn't be like red skinned or something like that. He'd just pretty much have a lot of strength. So he'd run towards All For One and punch him, and this would actually land. Pretty much All For One would kind of just get hit and start to slide across the floor. Now, pretty much what would happen is All For One would get a little mad, and he would start to go full out power. And Deku would be watching from afar, thinking that, Todoroki can definitely handle this. But Todoroki was slowly, his body was deteriorating, which was kind of weird. But afterwards, he was keeping up with All For One, but due to his body deteriorating, he was slowly losing. So unfortunately, All For One would pretty much plunge his fist straight through Todoroki's chest with a strength quirk. So after this would happen, pretty much All For One would take his quirk, and pretty much he would kill Todoroki. Now, if you guys are wondering, whoa, Todoroki's dead. Yeah, that's quite the surprise. But what would happen is Deku would be watching from afar. Now, what would happen is he'd start grunting, and pretty much he'd just be like, Todoroki! And he'd pretty much just scream out. I'm not really good at screaming, alright? So, bro, chill. So pretty much he'd have like one of those DBZ transformations, and his hair would start to go a little bit golden before he'd have the Super Saiyan transformation, I guess you can say. So lightning would kind of strike him from the sky, and his whole hair would turn golden before his body would gain like a KCM aura before he'd rush towards All For One, and All For One would barely dodge this. All For One was quite surprised. This guy was so fast. How was he even beating him? But Deku would just punch straight through his head. After this would happen, basically All For One's head would go flying off and then land on a pine stick. Like, this was pretty lucky, but his head would literally land on like a tree branch, and kind of be like in those movies when they kill a person, they put their head on the stick. It's kind of like that. So after this would happen, Deku would kind of be crying over Todoroki's body, and pretty much they would have their whole funeral and shit like that. And pretty much it would just be mourning. Now after this would happen, All Might would announce his retirement, and pretty much he would point towards Deku, basically saying that he's his successor. Now pretty much this would cause global, not outrage, but like a surprise. Basically Deku would kind of become the pro hero. He would have still finished school, but it would kind of be cut a little bit short due to his people needing him more. So pretty much the whole life would change around them in UA. And pretty much this will be the end of my part of what if Deku was a Saiyan. And without further ado, guys, I'll be handing back the mic to Zether.
Alright guys, so after listening to Aizen's part, I hope you guys did enjoy that part due to the fact that my boy is an up and coming what ifer. See, he hasn't been doing it for this long and I see so much potential in Aizen, so it would mean the world to me if you guys went over there and hopped on the Aizen train before it blows up. That being said though guys, I am going to be continuing the story. Okay, so after everything happens with All For One and All Might, basically Deku proceeds to, well, go to the hospital because Katsumi at this current moment is basically getting a couple of just checked up on, because you know she did get literally kidnapped by the villains, like weird. But yeah, before I do get into that, there's a couple of things that I do want to clear up. Number one, every time that Aizen basically said hey Bakugo, he basically meant Katsumi. Just I'm pretty sure he's not used to saying the name, so he just went with Bakugo. And as for some situations that were just like, yo, what's going on, just know Mans is like man, I probably didn't clear some things up properly. So yeah, like if there was a couple of things you guys were like, wait, hold on now, what happened? Then, you know, just kind of let that fly by. That being said though guys, we are now going to be getting back into it. Okay, so Deku would basically arrive to the hospital where he would see Katsumi and he would immediately hug her as he would embrace her. He would look her in the eyes and tell her to never pull something like that again. Katsumi would immediately say, well then don't let me get kidnapped again, as she would quite literally slap the man Deku across the face. However, before she could land it, Deku would catch the wrist and just go in for a kiss, as Katsumi would stop forcing it and she would then go in for one as well. This would lead to Deku saying, I thought I lost you, and Katsumi would basically just smile as she would then say, get off of me, come on, let's go train. As it's at this point that Deku would look over at Todoroki and he's like, so how you doing after finding out that stuff about Dabi? Todoroki would look at Deku as he would say, I mean, honestly man, I'm feeling fine. And after that, there's something that I am going to basically be having to mention. So if you guys didn't know, well, no, yeah, you did. Deku basically ended up using the Kari form that Broly uses, where he basically trains his Ozaru Wrath form, and he basically makes it smaller. In case some of you guys don't know what the Ikari form, it's basically the Great Ape transformation. However, you don't turn into a Great Ape, and you keep the multiplier. It's like a little bit of a rage boost. Deku ended up unlocking it because, you know, he has a tail, and he's a very primal instinct type fighter. Not like Goku, but similar to Vegeta-ish and Broly, where he just learns as he fights. That being said, Deku let off a giant amount of power when that happened. Therefore, from far, far away in the galaxy, a scouter, a very potent scouter at that, managed to pick up the signal, and Lord Frieza was informed. That being said, in a couple of months, Frieza will be arriving, the main, big, and bad. And some of you guys are probably going to be like, yo, dude, how is he going to beat Frieza? Well, you're going to have to find out. That being said, Deku would basically finish up the hospital, and it's at this point that they would basically be going into the, well, the provisional license stuff. Now, I am 100% not going to cover this because I hate the provisional license exam. It's so whack. Plus, I mean, Deku's a Saiyan. We all know what's going to happen. Actually, Deku doesn't have to go through the provisional license. People literally want Deku to already become a pro. So you know what I'm going to do? No, I'm not going to make him a pro. I'm not going to make him a pro, but I'm going to be giving him his provisional license, all right? That is what I will be doing. That being said, they will, of course, go back to class where they will then be introduced to the big three of UA. See, something that I did forget to mention on my last part of the recording was basically that Deku ended up meeting Mirio, Nejire, and Sun Eater. I always forget his real name, but Sun Eater, right? And well, he ended up meeting them because after he basically defeated All Might, Nezu kind of had him go over with them for a little bit of extra experience in terms of basically fighting against more groups of people. And seeing as they're basically the best of the best that UA has to offer at the current moment, Deku was training them as they were training him as well. See, Deku was basically training and fighting multiple opponents at once, and he's definitely going to be needing that when Frieza's soldiers arrive. That being said, this is when we will now basically be jumping over to the day that Mirio and all of them arrive. Immediately, Deku would see the big three in the classroom, and he would be like, yo, Mirio. Mirio would look at Deku as he would say, yo, what's up, Deku? As they would both basically dab each other up. This is when Todoroki would look at Deku and just give him like a weird glance as he's like, who are these guys? Deku would say, oh, yeah, right, I forgot. He didn't meet them yet. They're the big three of UA. These guys are pretty much the big and bad from this school. As Todoroki would look at Deku, he would then say, what? Big bad? As it's at this point that Deku would basically chuckle a little bit as he would say, man, just just dab him up. Like, this man's pretty chill. Todoroki would go in to dab him up, but Mirio would basically phase through him and push him a little bit. As Todoroki would get angry and shoot ice at him, but Deku would be like, bro, he's just trolling, Mirio plays like that a little bit. And Todoroki would just be like, oh, my bad. As it's at this point that everybody would start laughing, and Katsumi would walk up to Nejire. She would say, so, you're pretty strong, right? Nejire would say, I guess. I mean, I'm not really that bad. I'm not really that strong. As Katsumi would basically say, I want you to fight me. And this is what would basically initiate the fight against the big three. However, this time it would be the entire big three versus this big three: Katsumi, Todoroki, and Deku. They would face off against each other, with Deku fighting Mirio. However, the fact that Mirio can phase is such an advantage, because Deku, although he could punch the living lights out of Mirio, through the fact that he has been training with Deku every now and then, has basically gotten a little accustomed to Deku's fighting style, which is a lot of overthinking-ish and some subtle movements where his body simply moves on his own, if you understand what I mean. That being said, Deku and Mirio's fight would go crazy, as Deku would throw right hate, like a big right hand, right? Mirio would phase right through it as he would chuckle and go to poke Deku's eyes. Deku would immediately grab Mirio's arm, but Mirio would phase through, and Deku would slide Mirio's leg. As this is when Deku would say, Todoroki! Todoroki would say, right! As he would freeze Mirio in place, Mirio would phase in and come out as he would uppercut Deku so hard that Deku actually tilts his head slightly. Deku would then spit out some blood as he would say, looks like you're finally able to hurt me. Todoroki would look at Mirio as he's just shocked, like even he's never been able to damage Deku like that. As Todoroki would rush at Mirio and say, I got this one, Deku. He would rush in at Mirio, and Mirio in an instant would quite literally blitz at Todoroki, as he would say, what did you think this was? As he would punch Mirio so hard. Also, Mirio has one for all. See, if Deku didn't get one for all, and Todoroki's definitely not going to get one for all, Mirio has it. So Mirio would be using about 40% of one for all at this current moment, and he would jaw this man Todoroki to the ground, causing Deku to get a little angry and saying, all right, Mirio. He would crack his neck and knuckles and just be like, all right, let's go. As it's to this point that Deku would turn on his Ikari form, and again the scouters on Lord Frieza's ship would start picking up the signal, coming even closer, the planet Earth. This is when they are about 2 months away, and Frieza would be smiling as he knows that this is the next planet he must conquer. First, for the great battle, and second, for the market price of this giant planet. This is when he would basically start going even faster, and it will now take 2 months to arrive. That being said, Deku will of course end up whooping Mirio after this, and after that, they would basically end up with, the little thing. That being said, this is when Deku would of course be invited to go to Sir Nide's agency, and Deku would of course accept. When he arrives, however, Sir Nide would not be doing none of that stamp stuff, because in every scenario that Sir Nide sees, Deku always gets the stamp. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The future cannot change. No matter how much Sir Nide can see into the future, he cannot dodge, and he cannot move at faster speeds than All Might, because he himself said that the only person who could take that away from him was potentially All Might. So if Deku is stronger, then I see no reason for Deku not to be able to whoop the man. So yeah, he would definitely be able to not do any of that stuff, and Sir Nide would just sign the paper right away. That being said, this is when Deku would then basically go on patrol with Mirio. They would basically start walking, as Deku would be in the Saiyan and the Goku Black outfit. And also, Aizen, he said, the one punch hero? Nah, not happening. Deku's hero name would be Vegeta. No. What would his Saiyan name be? I'm gonna go with Kakarot, Vegeta, Shallot. I'm gonna go with Shallot. His hero name is Shallot, right? That's his hero name, because Shallot's a pretty dope character. So I'm gonna go with Shallot. And Deku's hero name is Shallot instead, all right? That's a lot better than One Punch Hero. I don't know. Me personally, Aizen, I think it's a little better. So my bad if I hurt y'all feelings. I love you though, bro, still. So yeah, anyways, that being said, this is when Deku would basically proceed to did I really just say basically 4 times in a row? Sorry about that, guys. Anyways, also one thing that I do want to mention is it's pretty late for me right now. It's like currently 11 p.m. at night, and I just got back from the gym, so I'm pretty tired. So if I do sound a little lackluster, full of energy, or if I do sound a little low on this part of the recording, I do deeply apologize for that. However, with that being said, let's continue this story. Deku will of course be walking with Mirio as they would both essentially run into a little girl, that being Eri. She would run into Deku's arms, and immediately upon contact, Eri would just feel so much firmness coming from Deku's body. She would immediately curl her head into Deku's chest as Deku would pick her up. Being about 6'2", he would then look out into the alleyway as he would see a man with gloves. He would immediately notice who this is. Overhaul. Deku on an instant would look at Mirio as Mirio would nod, and on sight, Deku would pretty much grab Eri as he would fly away. Mirio is the one who's actually going to defeat Overhaul. He would charge up 50% full cowling off rip and blitz Overhaul as he would go for the poking eye thing and then punch him in the stomach once, uppercut him, and then he would proceed to elbow him back down into the ground as hard as he possibly can. That would knock Shisaki out. And they would of course find the quirk deleting bullets, which, you know, Overhaul is going to have on him at this current moment. And this is when Overhaul would basically be questioned and his entire organization would be shut down in minutes after that. Literal minutes. Deku would go on in there and obliterate everyone by himself. And at this point, the public basically wants Deku to now become a hero. Like, there's nobody who's stopping him. Everybody saw what he did against All For One, a villain that it seemed as All Might was even struggling against. But if Deku is able to do all this against people like that, he might as well be a protector already. Deku won't just be held by one place like Japan. Deku could be the hero of the world, the hero that this world desperately needs. Deku has the power, the mentality to back it all up. Now, all Deku needs is, well, the tactical mind, I guess you could say, because there's a lot of moments which Saiyans make really awful battle decisions. So that's basically the only thing that Deku is pretty much lacking. Power and stuff like that. You know, he has pretty good things, but he is lacking in some aspects, as well as control. And you will see what I mean by that. That being said, this is when Deku would become a pro hero, and the next 2 months would basically flash by as Deku would continue to hang out with Katsumi, Todoroki, and Momo. And on one particular night, Deku and Katsumi would basically proceed to start multiplying as Deku would start all over Katsumi, if you get what I'm putting down. And yeah, he would go full Ikari mode as he does it. So Katsumi, her back is shattered. Like, he would quite literally shatter her spine. Recovery Girl would have to put that girl back in her place. And no, I'm totally kidding, guys, but seriously though, Deku would put in that work, right? And afterwards, this is when now 2 months would have passed. Frieza's ship and an unknown object would basically enter the stratosphere. They would notice this, and immediately Deku would be the first person called. Deku would of course arrive on the scene, and it's at this point that Deku would have actually been at UA. Todoroki would have asked Deku to come along with him, and Deku would have flown Todoroki with him. They would both arrive on the scene when they would both notice 3 giant ships just landed, 1 main one and 2 smaller ones. Immediately a bunch of soldiers would start walking out, and Deku would say, "Aliens?" Deku will still have his tail in this version of events, which will be a major plot point, okay? And, well, this is when they would both look at the soldiers as they would say, "What are you doing here?" The soldiers would then look at both of them as they would scan their power levels and be like, they're a puny 1000. What are these guys gonna do? Deku would look at them weird as he would tilt his head and just be like, 1000? Alright. He would immediately start pumping up his power level as the soldiers would get scared, and Todoroki would as well. His ki, not Todoroki's ki, well, everybody has ki within them, but Todoroki would basically power up his quirk, and this is when they would both rush at the villains. This is when immediately they would begin to destroy Frieza's soldiers, just obliterating them. Deku and Todoroki would both single-handedly defeat the fodder soldiers very easily on some Trunks fashion when Metal Frieza and Cooler, or no, not Cooler, but King Cold arrived on planet Earth after Kakarot was, you know, on planet Yardrat. That being said, this is when we will now basically have what is it called? Let me really think about this. This is when we will basically have Deku pretty much see a strange person coming out on a floating chair, and a bunch of like 5 soldiers would come out. Deku would immediately look at them as he would say, looks like we got more fodder soldiers. Deku would immediately look at Frieza as he would sense his ki, and it is completely on a different level. Deku would say that his ki is as strong as his Ikari form. Deku would immediately get worried, as it's at this point that Godo would stop time and everybody would freeze. This is when Deku would start having trouble moving, and he would start using nothing but his will alone to start moving slightly. He would start inching towards Godo as Godo would just be like, He would be holding his breath, and he would throw a giant piece of wood straight at Deku's chest. However, right when it makes contact, Deku's chest would puff up so much that the piece would just shatter upon contact. And when Goldo just lets go of his breath, Deku would blitz the man as he would hit his head off he would punch him so hard his head just completely gets flung from his body. Deku and Todoroki would then rush at the rest of the soldiers, as Todoroki would provide backup, as Deku was the main one. He would immediately activate his Ikari form after Captain Ginyu would rush Deku and beat the ever-living life out of Deku. It would be lights out upon the first hit. Deku would then be woken up after more and more hits would come in, and Deku would finally start tasting the feeling of defeat. Immediately, Deku would start learning as he fights, and the Ginyu Force would serve as a little bit of a training thing for Deku to basically overcome. Deku would end up defeating both of them with the help of Todoroki, and immediately Frieza would say, "Oh, ho, 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 ho." You know that Frieza laugh. As he would begin to clap, he would say, "Looks like we have a monkey that survived. I guess I came here and it was worth it after all. Gotta get rid of your putrid race." Deku would look at Frieza as he would say, "What are you talking about?" Todoroki would say, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" As Deku would basically look at Frieza, Frieza would then smile and say, "Oh, you don't know?" As he would then begin to basically explain to Deku, "I was the one who destroyed your entire race." Deku's eyes would widen as he would say, "What are you talking about?" And Frieza would then say, "You've never wondered why you have a tail, boy? Well, it's because you're a Saiyan. An alien, if you will." As Deku would look at him and say, "No, you're lying. I'm not a Saiyan. I'm an Earthling." Deku would immediately rush towards Frieza, and Frieza would backhand Deku right on the neck, causing him to fall unconscious. Immediately, Todoroki would rush at Frieza as he would say, "You bastard!" He would rush at Frieza as he would try to shoot flames at him, but Frieza would use his telekinesis as he would begin to lift Todoroki off the ground and say, "Your weakness disgusts me. Now die," as he would explode Todoroki. And Deku would wake up like 5 seconds afterwards as he would barely be able to move. He would then barely be able to see as Todoroki's body would explode. And as soon as Deku sees that, it's as if time would stop. Deku's heart would stop beating as he would realize, Todoroki, he's gone. He would then look towards Frieza as he would say, You killed him!" As he would scream to the heavens, and he would then immediately just rush at Frieza. His Ikari form would start flashing as his eyes would turn blue to black and blue to black as he would rush at Frieza, and Frieza would immediately just start getting completely the life beat out of him. Frieza would then try to evade Deku's movements, but Deku would immediately turn into a Saiyan as he would rush at Frieza, and before Frieza gets a chance to turn into any of his other forms, Deku would wail on Frieza mercilessly. There is zero hope for Frieza to transform into his other states. That's how Deku was going to handle him. One thing that I've always wondered is, why do the Z fighters always grant the opponent the chance to transform? See, if it was me, and let's say I was fighting against somebody, I wouldn't give them the chance to get into their fighting stance and get ready. Nah, I would rush at them and immediately just start stomping them out, because I ain't about to get beat up. That's not happening. So yeah, Deku would do just that, and he would lose himself completely. The Saiyan transformation would flash a green light, as Deku isn't exactly Broly's reincarnation, but I did say Deku was a Saiyan elite, right? Yeah, that's where all this immense power comes from. Deku is the legendary Super Saiyan. Deku would rush at Frieza as he would mercilessly beat on the man, and Frieza would be no more as Deku shoots a massive mouth beam at Frieza, completely eviscerating him. There would be choppers in the air as Deku would shoot ki blasts at the choppers, exploding them on instant, and people would then start freaking out as they're like, "Oh no, he's lost it." A bunch of pro heroes would immediately be called upon the scene as they would all try to stop Deku, and not a single person would be able to do it. Midnight would start basically letting off all of her gas. What's it called? Mr. Best Genius would come in and try to restrain him with the claws, but nothing would work. All Might would try to use his last embers. Endeavor would try, but the loss of his son would haunt him as nobody is able to stop Deku. Deku would continue to go haywire as out of nowhere, it's as if Deku saw Todoroki's spirit. Todoroki would talk to him telepathically as he would say, "Deku, snap out of it." Deku would hear Todoroki and stop for an instant. As this would give Katsumi enough time to arrive to the scene, she would immediately hug Deku and start crying as she would say, "Please, snap out of it, Deku. This isn't you." Deku would go back to his senses as he would see Katsumi, and Todoroki would tell him, "I'll be okay." Deku would shed a tear as he would say, "How could I be okay? You're the only person who was ever a friend to me. You've been there since the beginning, Shoto. I'll never forgive you." And Frieza, you'll rue the day you came here, as that is where we're going to be leaving off this series for What If Deku Was a Saiyan, the movie. I hope you guys enjoyed this series, seeing as, it was a pretty dope collab. I hope you guys enjoyed my boy Aizen's part, seeing as, the man put a lot of work. He put a solid 30 minutes into the video. So if you guys did enjoy his part, please go check him out. You do not have to in case you didn't like him, but please do me a favor, guys, and write down comments on how he should improve, or basically just let me know what you guys thought about Aizen's part. Help him improve, guys, because he's an up-and-coming what-iffer, and I trust me, guys, he has so much potential, way more than I have probably, and I honestly have the utmost respect for Aizen. This man is going to go far in the what-if community. I can feel it. So if you guys want to hop on that train early, y'all better click that first link in the description. But with that being said, it has been your boy Zether. I love each and every single one of you guys. Thank you so much for 20K. You guys have no idea how much that means to me. 20K special will be dropping soon, probably in 2 days. I will be needing some time to work on it. But with that being said, peace.